Senator for Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. $3 trillion. As best I can tell, that is how much money the United States Congress has appropriated. Let me amend that. That's how much taxpayer money Congress has appropriated to fight the coronavirus and its aftermath. $3 trillion. That's 12 zeros. $3 trillion is 3,000 billion dollars. These numbers take my breath away, Mr. President. We spent this money even though we don't have it. We don't even have 5% of it. We borrowed every penny. Our national debt will now be approximating, maybe exceeding $25 trillion. The last coronavirus bill that we passed, Mr. President, as you know, was the CARES Act. But it was not the only bill. We've passed a number of pieces of legislation to try to fight this virus and the COVID-19 that it causes. And Mr. President, those bills were very hard for me to vote for, not because I don't care about the American people. I do, of course. We all do. But because of the fact that it was just such a staggering amount of money. I have spent my career in government more at the state government level than the federal government level, but I have spent my career in government being cheap when it comes to taxpayer money. And it bothers me, as it should bother all of us, that we spent money that we don't have. I've driven all over Washington, D.C., and I can't find the money tree. These are taxpayer dollars. But I voted for the bills, including but not limited to the CARES Act, because it was clear we had to do something. We had to appropriate money to fight the virus. We had to appropriate money to help people and their businesses to recover economically from the impact of the virus. We don't know what works in the CARES Act and what doesn't work, and we won't know for a while. I suspect we'll look back and say, well, this measure was a pretty smart thing to do and with hindsight, but this measure fell a little bit short. But already, many of my colleagues, and I say this with respect, have other bills to spend even more money, primarily to help state and local government. It's like a Labor Day mattress sale around here. The number of bills flying around. Someone wants to spend another $250 billion. Somebody else wants to spend $500 billion and give it to state and local government. Speaker Pelosi wants to spend $1 trillion. I think all that's premature, Mr. President. I suggest that we pause. Once again, we see what works, we see what has worked, and see what hasn't worked. Also, it would seem to me that any fair-minded person would have to conclude that we should open up. Once we open up government and see the economic impact, we'll have additional information. And make no mistake about it, we are going to have to open up the economy again. I don't see any reason why we can't both save lives and save jobs. But, so I want to make it clear, Mr. President, that every single one of these $3 trillion, as far as I'm concerned, is a precious commodity because they come from taxpayers. Now, the discussion that many of my colleagues have been having about spending additional money on top of the $3 trillion, specifically for state and local government, seems to forget that we've already appropriated an enormous amount of money to state and local government. In my state, for example, I'll just take Louisiana. I think as a result of the CARES Act, we're going to receive about $3.5 billion. And I'm very grateful for every single penny. This Congress appropriated $287 million for public schools in Louisiana, $190 million for universities, $623 million for hospitals. We have received extra Medicaid payments, and additionally, Louisianians have received $1.803 billion for state and local government. You add it all up, and that's about $3.5 billion that has already been appropriated just to Louisiana. Some states got more. Some states got less. So the point I'm trying to make, Mr. President, is that we need to recognize the fact that we've already done a lot for state government. We've already done a lot for our cities. And I happily voted for the bill. I had some reluctance for reasons I've explained, just the breathtaking amount of money. Now, this doesn't mean that our states and local governments are not going to have to sacrifice. We've certainly asked the American people to sacrifice, and we certainly asked the American business community to sacrifice. And I think state government and local government are going to have to share in that sacrifice. They're going to have to scrub their budgets, and that's just a fact. As far as I'm concerned, the federal government needs to do the same thing. There's not a single member of this body that believes every single penny we spend in the federal budget is absolutely necessary. I have a bill, Mr. President, that I think may well make it unnecessary to appropriate new money for our state and local governments. I have a bill, Mr. President, that I think may well moot the entire issue. We made one mistake. We probably made others, but in my judgment, I know we made one in the CARES Act when we put restrictions on the amount of money that we gave to state and local government. Now, I understand why we did it, and at the time I supported it. We do not want to bail out states, for example, that have been mismanaged. If a state decides to give generous retirement benefits at an early retirement age to its state employees, as far as I'm concerned, that's that state's business. But also, as far as I'm concerned, the people of Louisiana shouldn't have to pay for that, what in my opinion is mismanagement. And I think a number of my colleagues in the Senate share that sentiment. But in hindsight, I'll take Louisiana as an example. We received $1.8 billion. There is a requirement in the legislation that says that $1.8 billion can only be used to defray the expenses of coronavirus expended by state governments, by the state of Louisiana, and by our cities. And that's what the statute says. And it's the statute passed by Congress that controls. Now, the Department of Treasury has issued, I'm not sure what they issued, but they issued something, they didn't go through the APA, that says, well, the states, Louisiana, for example, has great flexibility to spend that $1.8 billion that we received in Louisiana that went to state and local government. They can spend it on first responders and policemen and school teachers, and I appreciate the Department of Treasury issuing that, whatever it was they issued. I think they call it a directive. There's just one problem. The statute doesn't say that. And the United States Treasury does not have the authority, nor should it, to change a bill passed by the United States Congress. So I'm grateful to Secretary Mnuchin to try to help here. But I don't believe what he's doing is legal. And it gives me great pause that state government and our cities might act on a directive from the Treasury that could change 2 weeks from now. I think the only way to address this issue is through a statute passed by Congress. Here's what my bill would do. My bill would not appropriate any new money. Let me say that again. My bill would not appropriate any new money. My bill would say, with respect to the $150 billion that this Congress unanimously in the Senate has already appropriated to help state governments and local governments, that's the $1.8 billion that I'm referring to that Louisiana received. My bill would just say they can use that money for operating expenses. They can't use it, my bill would specifically prohibit it, to bail out mismanaged retirement systems. They can't use it to bail out any retirement systems, mismanaged or otherwise. But they can use that money with this small change to the CARES Act to fill the holes in their budget as a result of any revenue shortfalls. In my state, for example, Mr. President, we're very heavily reliant on the sales tax and on the personal income tax. I think that this measure may well moot the issue of having to appropriate brand new money for states and local governments. The governors I talk to, Mr. President, tell me, Kennedy, look, we really appreciate the money you sent to state and local government. There's just one problem. Our hands are tied. Our problem today is not enough money to fight the virus. Our problem today is how do we fill a hole as a result of the shortfalls in our sales tax. And that's what my bill would do, Mr. President. And for that reason, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Appropriations be discharged from further consideration of S-3608. That's my bill, Mr. President. And the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. I further ask, Mr. President, that Kennedy's substitute amendment at the desk be considered and agreed to. The bill as amended be considered, read for a third time and passed, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
We will make America great again.